you watched my last video, you probably know that I said I'm thinking about working on a spiritual rewrite of Zenless Season 2. And because of this, I've been thinking, if I'm going to remix these characters, how might I remake their kit? And then this made me start thinking about Zenless and how they buff characters in general, with much more promised in the future. So that's what this video is. Me going through every character that I think needs some love, and pitching my ideas on how I would buff them. I'm talking about rethinking their identities, adding new mechanics, making these characters actually fun to play, and leaning into their quote-unquote gameplay fantasy. Some of these ideas are kind of conservative, and some of them are very out there. But all of them come from the same place of wanting every character to have a reason to exist in the game and have their own unique identity. Jane Doe. Jane Doe's fantasy is that she plays like a ballerina, smooth, slippery like butter. And she kinda does, but for a character who is so dodge-centric, it is really weird that her signature move is standing still and spinning. There is a disconnect between her identity and her mechanics. So here's my fix. First, a small flavor addition. When Jane is hit by an attack, she does an auto-dodge that refreshes every 30 seconds. This is inspired by a mechanic Miyabi has in Lost Void. Would this fix Jane? No, not at all. Would this even really be good for Jane? Not really. Is it nice flavor? I think so. I think it reinforces the fantasy that Jane is this untouchable spy, Let's talk about the real changes. I want to rework her EX special to function more like Evelyn's, where if you time it right, the EX special itself acts as a dodge counter. And for Sol Kachao Spin, her signature move, I want to make it so it's more like Chingy's mechanic. If you time your release of the basic button correctly, you get a dodge counter. And then I want to make it so after you do the dodge counter, you can hold basic again to resume your Skull Chow Spin. On top of that, I want to massively buff her dodge counter damage, like a stupid amount. You might have noticed we've made it so a lot of her kit chains into her dodge counter. So if we're gonna do that so much, let's make her dodge counter really good. A lot of people have pointed out that Jane is really not that much better than Piper. And the reason behind that is not just that Piper is really good, she is really good, but it's mostly because Piper builds Anomaly twice as fast as Jane. It's not the exact number, but it's basically twice as fast as Jane. So Jane is getting like half the Anomaly procs as Piper is, which is why Piper is able to catch up to Jane so easily. These dodge counters could apply a lot of Anomaly, and help her catch up with the rest of the cast that apply Anomaly really fast. I think all of these changes are pretty simple. I didn't really change Jane much. I made her EX special a dodge counter, and then I made her Skull Chow Spin also a dodge counter. But I think these would lean into what makes Jane so much more fun to play, being untouchable, and a reactive ballerina who punishes you for every swing you take at her. Caesar King. Caesar is in a really rough spot. Her only real niche is providing anti-interrupt. As you get better at the game, you need anti-interrupt less and less. The most fun way to play her is keeping her on field and getting those satisfying
perfect parries
by timing your EX specials correctly. But that is not the most optimal way to play her. The most optimal way to play her is to do a perfect assist in, do an assist follow-up, and then swap back to your main DPS. Way less engaging, but that's the most optimal way to play her. The fix. First, change her additional 1000 attack buff to apply to every single person on the team. I don't think a restrictive buff is really a part of her identity. I don't think it really makes her better or makes her feel unique, and the cost of keeping it exclusive to whoever is on field is way too high given how teams are actually played at this point of the game. Second, and this is a far bigger change, when you land a perfect assist with Caesar, when you land a perfect parry with Caesar, I mean the EX special kind, it triggers a backwards quick swap. So you parry, and then you automatically swap into your DPS. On top of that, this swap would provide a buff to whoever you swapped into, likely your damage dealer, and it applies a defense shred debuff to the enemy for around 15-ish seconds. This means the most optimal way to play Caesar is now also the most fun way to play her. You're reacting to enemy attacks, timing your parries. This type of active gameplay is now rewarded. You're incentivized to play with your head instead of just doing a brain-dead assist rotation. The better you parry, the more your team benefits. This would also probably make Astral Voice competitive on her. I don't know if that's actually true, but maybe the theory crafters could have some fun with that one. Colada. So, what's her problem? Colada's current niche is that she stuns faster than basically anyone in the game. And that's kind of it. That is her identity. You can't really take that away from her or make her do something else, because then she's not really Colada. Worst of all, she stuns so fast that it actually works against her. Your main DPS can almost never have enough time to actually build up the resources they need to dump into the stun window. So you're getting these lightning fast stuns, and then your damage dealer shows up to the party with an empty tank, and that is a problem. My idea is to give Colada a dual identity. She's still the fastest stunner in the game, but now she's also a battery. And this is like the most weird part that I've added. I'll let her control when the stun window actually triggers. So here's how I imagine it working. When Colada fills the enemy stun bar to the max, instead of immediately triggering the stun state when you do a heavy attack, the stun window instead enters a weird limbo state. The bar is visually flashing, the enemy is clearly about to be stunned, but the gray bar / rainbow bar does not kick in yet. The enemy functionally counts as stunned during this, so characters like Harumasa, who get a bonus when the enemy is stunned like an additional quiver, still get their benefit. But the actual stun window does not start. This means that Colada can hold the stun hostage until your DPS is ready. Meanwhile, her basic 4, and especially her enhanced basic 4 with Ben, are now providing energies and decibels to your teammates. So while you're stunning super fast, your team is also building resources a lot faster too. Her ultimate also gets enhanced resource generation, so like even more ult and energy with that. You're no longer punished for stunning quickly, you're rewarded for it. Banyue. Banyue doesn't really need a buff, but I'm including him here because I am selfish and I love this character. But I do think there is one legitimate issue. His rage buildup is very slow, and his attacks feel functionally very similar to each other. The one standout is One's Path, which has some really nice grouping. But besides that, there isn't much decision making in which EX special you use and when. So I want to differentiate his EX specials so each one has a clear role, and there's actually a reason to think about which one you're going to use.
Lion's Roar.
The lowest damage EX special. My change, crank the damage way up, but give it a very tiny hitbox. Like a very small hitbox. You literally have to be right in the enemy's face to do any damage. I make this suggestion because you can cancel into Lion's Roar from One's Path. The combo becomes gathering everyone up with One's Path, with its AoE, then dump massive single target damage into everyone you've gathered up. They complement each other perfectly. Earthshaker, already the highest damage option. No changes needed, let's just keep it as is. Its niche it's the biggest damage one. One's Path already has a niche, as I already said. It has great AoE and grouping. Let's keep it as is. Earth's Tremor. Make this the Rage Builder. It does less damage than the others, but generates significantly more rage and provides a short buff. The catch, this effect can only trigger once every 20 seconds. This is just so you don't spam it, you're keeping a timer in your head. Again, I want to add more decision making with this character. Banyue's whole fantasy is that he's a very complex character. I want to lean into that. Not right now. To me, Banyue's complexity is somewhat shallow. Maybe that's not the right word. He's an extremely complex character that has a lot of decision making, but specifically with his EX specials, it feels a little shallow. I know Earth's Tremor is also an attack that can be animation cancelled into, and when it is cancelled into, it generates even more rage on top of that. Oh, and I didn't mention what the short buff is. To me, the short buff could be anything. I was thinking like temporarily, maybe like a 1.5 boost to your rage generation, but I don't know, it could be anything. Now, some people have pointed out that the animation cancel attacks currently cost double adrenaline, but don't do double damage, so they're rarely worth using outside of stun. Some have suggested just making them do double damage, but if you did that, they'd become the correct answer in every single situation. This kills decision making. My changes make it so sometimes you want to do the animation cancels and sometimes you don't. It depends on whether you need to build rage, damage, or AoE, and I think this is way more interesting. Alexandrina. So, full transparency, I do not know Rina's kit super well, but from what I've seen and what the community has discussed, she is decent in mono electric teams, but she does not have a strong enough identity to justify her slot. So here's my idea. We make Rina the Sokaku of mono electric. For those of you who don't know, Sokaku, while being a support, is the central piece of Miyabi's mono ice team. She's a support who can also function as a sub-DPS anomaly agent. You can also draw a similar parallel to Nicole in mono ether, where she does decent damage if you build her like an anomaly agent as well, despite her being a support. I think Rina should follow this template. Reward her kit to feel more like a sub-DPS anomaly agent in terms of game feel. Make her feel way more active on field. Make her combos feel impactful. She'd still be a support at her core, but she'd provide enough personal damage and electric synergy that she's the obvious glue piece for any mono-electric composition. I'll be honest, I don't have granular details about what I'd actually change because I don't know her that well. But I think I have the right direction, and I'd love to hear from Rina mains in the comments of specifically what they see. Like, would you change your basics? Would you change your EX special? What would you guys do? Anton, what's up, bro? Anton is currently one of the most boring characters to play in Zenless Zone Zero, in my humble opinion. At M6, his optimal rotation is this. Quick swap with Astra, spam EX special, drill, repeat, and that's it. There's almost zero player expression. And for a character whose whole aesthetic is inspired by Gurren Lagann, a show about escalation, passion, and breaking through your limits, that is pretty tragic. I want Anton to feel like his inspirations. So here's the big addition. A new resource called RPM. You generate RPM by holding basic, which drills into the enemy. The higher your RPM, the more damage you deal per second. EX specials also have their place too, where if you see the enemy about to attack you, you press EX special to time a perfect parry. Think like Caesar and what she does with her EX special. If you land it, you get a massive RPM boost. Dodge counters would also do the same thing, though not as much as a perfect parry. However, what happens if you mistime this? Either you miss your perfect parry or you fail a dodge counter. Well then, the bar resets completely back to 0. It's a very harsh punishment. He's supposed to be like a win more character. The better you are, the better he is. The worse you are, the worse he is by a lot. Now when the RPM bar is full, you're supposed to let go. And when you do, it results in this massive attack. It's supposed to feel like you're breaking through the heavens, you're drilling the absolute hell out of everything in your area. And then it resets. It's supposed to be like a really massive area of effect damage, like a mini earthquake, like a localized earthquake. And then, I want to add some synergy with the Colada buff I mentioned earlier. The enemy is stunned, the RPM rate is increased by an absurd amount. Even without Colada, this would be so you could generate your resources as much as possible in the stun window, and then dump them, because you'd really want your RPM to be to the max during the stun window. But with Colada, she can hold the enemy in a limbo stun state, and then Anton can go building RPM and farming decibels and damage like crazy. He'd be ulting every single stun window guaranteed because of Colada, and with Colada stunning insanely fast, they'd have an electric duo. I think this is very good because currently, I'm not sure if you noticed, no one in Belobog Industries has any synergy with each other at all. Jufufu. Okay, I'm gonna be blunt. Jufufu is cooked. She was completely taken over by Dialin. Everything was taken from her. Dialin just came in and robbed everything from Jufufu. Jufufu's whole identity was, I will give you more decibels so you can ultimate more. But Dialin just makes it so you can force a chain attack and convert them into free ultimates without even spending decibels. She extends the stun duration, she buffs the stun damage multiplier, she does basically everything Jufufu does and more and better. It's like what Jay Stern said in one of his videos, would you rather have $1 or $2? The fix. Yeah, this one's tough. I'm gonna be completely honest, I'm not really sure how to fix her. But here's my idea. Give Jufufu an ability to trigger mini ultimates through a backwards quick assist that could trigger whenever she uses her own ultimate. It wouldn't play like a full animation cut or anything, it would just be an overworld attack that does roughly half the damage as an actual ultimate. Combine this with a significant increase to Jufufu's decibel generation, and now you have a character whose niche is more frequent lower powered ultimates versus Dialin's fewer but more impactful ones. Is this enough? I don't really know. Would this even feel good? Probably not. It would probably be really clunky to implement, but I really can't think of another option Jufufu could have that would differentiate her from Dialin. Hugo is on a timer, so let's save him. In a vacuum, his skill ceiling is basically 0. You just mash EX special when the enemy is stunned. Now, to be fair, the skill expression comes from the stunners on his team, using them to stun as fast as possible. But Hugo himself doesn't bring much in terms of moment-to-moment decision making. So first, let's make Hugo's buffs apply to the whole team. So his stunners actually have stats closer to a sub DPS. You're playing them like attackers too, not just stun bots. As for the buffs, I was thinking of, instead of just a plus 800 attack buff, it could be like plus crit damage and crit rate too, you know, a whole lot of things. Just make your stunners a lot closer to DPSs. Now for the main mechanic, Hugo has this attack called Dark Abyss Concerto that basically all his attacks flow into, and it has 2 versions, a short hold version and a long hold version. I'll call these Laser 1 and Laser 2. Here's what I want to do with these. For Laser 1, it triggers a quick assist into the stunner in front of Hugo and gives them a daze buff. For Laser 2, the same idea, but it's a backwards quick assist instead. On top of this, Hugo had a feature in his beta where he'd do this attack as an aftershock whenever the active agent did a heavy attack. I also want to remind everyone that with all aftershock agents, when you swap into them during their attack, you're kind of locked into the attack for a little bit before you go into the idle state. So here is my change. When you swap into Hugo while he's doing an aftershock, you can now chain into Laser 1 or Laser 2, which also makes it so you can quick assist into your stunners. This introduces a new part into the dynamic where you're now keeping an eye on Hugo for when he does his aftershocks, so you can swap into him and do a quick assist. This would probably make it so Hugo's best set is also Astral Voice, maybe? Or maybe either Astral Voice or that... I'm blanking on the name. What's the name of that aftershock set? I'll search it up. Shadow Harmony. So either Shadow Harmony or Astral Voice. The whole team becomes this interconnected machine where the stunners are doing a lot of damage on their own and Hugo is orchestrating the entire thing. And occasionally you swap into him to buff your stunners even more. And then his whole stun rotation doesn't really change much, but it doesn't need to. Ching-Yi! So, I have to be real with you, I have Ching-Yi. She is technically Harumasa's best in slot stunner, but I do not use her. The reason being that she is really boring to play. You just spam basic attack until the enemy is stunned. That's it, Carpal Tunnel Simulator. On top of that, very on-field stunners like Ching-Yi are not rewarded in the current meta. Every second Ching-Yi spends on-field is a second your DPS isn't doing damage. So here's my fix. First, a slight buff to her personal damage. Give her higher natural crit damage. Since you're building King of the Summer on her anyways, you'll reach that 50% crit rate naturally, and with how rapidly she hits, you're gonna be crit damaging a lot. Second, and more importantly, I want to give her a parry. Instead of mindlessly spamming basic attacks, you now have to react to the enemy. This makes it so she is a lot more engaging to play. The parry would come from her EX special. Currently, and I could be wrong, you just press EX special when she has enough energy. There isn't a lot of thought into it. This change of making her EX special a parry would be a lot more engaging, since a parry provides a lot of impact, a lot of stun, and the perfect parry would also have higher damage multipliers. Third, I want to give her Jifufu's current mechanic of increasing the decibel cap and boosting team decibel generation. Currently, when you use Qingyi, you're only ultimating every other stun, because your DPS is not on field that much, so they're not generating many decibels. This change would make it so you could potentially, if you play everything correctly, get a ultimate off every stun window, even if they're not on field that much. These changes are very simple, but I think they'd make Qingyi fantastic to play. More reactive, more rewarding, and less punishing for the time your DPS spends off field. Neko Mata. Okay, dude, guys, I have just read through her kit, and she might be the worst designed character in the game. Whoever was in charge of this kit, please never cook again. Her additional ability requires you to hold off using your EX special until you assault the enemy twice. It doesn't require this, but it's what it wants you to do, which is crazy. She also has this awful thing, where you have a 1 in 3 chance to repeat an attack 3 times and do additional damage. This chance-based mechanic in a character kit is so fucking annoying, man. This does not make any sense in an action game unless it is a gimmick for a joke character. And unfortunately, since she's based on Lucky Cats, moving the RNG mechanic doesn't really feel right thematically. So, here's my fix. We're gonna do something stupid. We're gonna make Nekomata a pseudo-anomaly agent. Still a DPS, but she procs assaults way more frequently. This isn't a vehicle for damage, she doesn't have a lot of anomaly proficiency, just a lot of anomaly mastery. But the assaults that she triggers could be like a battery for her own kit. For this change, she would need a massive amount of anomaly mastery on her moves, like Piper levels. Now, I said her assault triggers would be like a battery for her own kit. What do I mean by that? Well, for that, let's look at her RNG problem. Nekomata will get a new resource called Charm. She builds Charm when she lands back attacks or triggers an assault. Charm increases the probability of her attacks doing big damage. It resets when the enemy stun window ends. I also want to change her non-powered special attacks to work like Hugo's EX specials. It teleports you to the other side of the enemy, making back attacks way easier to land. Imagine a non-EX special into a basic combo move. That would feel really slick. This would also make her non-EX special have a use I really don't like in Zenless, how for most characters, a non-EX special does nothing. I think that's kind of lame. This would be like one of the few characters where using her non-EX special actually has a use. The gameplay loop becomes teleporting behind the enemy, attacking their back, building charm through back attacks and assaults, and your charm increases the odds of big hits. Lucky Cat fantasy, but with actual player agency. Shuyuan. Now, I don't use Shuyuan, so take this proposal with a grain of salt. Currently, the best way to play her is as a off-field DPS, where you stun the enemy and then swap her in, and then you hold basic attack and wait for her to shoot the enemy. I think this is kind of clunky, it just like game feel wise, I don't like playing Shuyuan. So here is my idea. We will make it so her non-powered EX specials spend her bullet resource. They shoot bullets really fast. So now you're just tapping it rapid fire to shoot the enemy. Like physically holding the controller, I imagine it feeling better that way. Less holding and waiting and more active fire shooting. But this has a problem. Shuyuan was designed to be an off-field DPS. Because of this, when you have her on field, you are near guaranteed to have her full of energy, and after 2 chain attacks, which is what you're likely gonna do, you're also gonna be chock full of bullets. So you don't really need to generate more bullets, which is what her EX special does for you. Here is my idea. If you're already fully capped on bullets, It becomes an enhanced EX special that does the damage equivalent of a regular EX special plus 3 shell attacks combined. So it never feels like a waste. You're always getting value. I'm not really sure if these changes alone would save Shuyuan since I don't know the character deeply enough, but at the very least it would be an improvement to how she currently plays. Lighter! It's hard to say if Lighter truly needs a buff, but Dial-In has honestly screwed up the balance for stunners so bad that I think it is worth addressing. Pre-Dial-In, Lighter was a character with incredible buffs within a specific niche, Ice and Fire teams. Dial-In came along and invalidated a lot of that by being far more general purpose. The tricky part is that Lighter already buffs Ice and Fire teams so much that making him buff them even more would create a situation where those teams feel like they literally cannot function without Lighter, and I do not want that. So here's my idea. Let's start with some flavor. When Lighter is in his Ora Ora state, give him something like Banyue's dodge and parry mechanic, where his dodge becomes a parry. He actually had something kinda similar in his event, where if you held down the dodge button, it became a parry. So I want something like that. This wouldn't solve any balance issues on its own, but would provide some nice days and thematically feel very nice for someone like Lighter. Second, I want to free up his additional ability. There's nothing in his identity that says it requires it to stay locked. There's no reason to keep this as is. Next, I want his second EX special to apply a defense shred debuff to the enemy for ice and fire damage for about 10 seconds. The shred should be moderate, nothing crazy, maybe around 10%. I don't want him to become an on-field stunner that feels wrong for his character and is not really his identity. I want to massively increase his personal damage. He's the champion after all. Thematically, it makes sense that he should hit like a freight train. You know those directional attacks Lighter has when you hold the joystick in any direction? Currently, they're very useless. But my idea is to make it so when he is in his Ora Ora state, you can flick the joystick in any direction, and if you time one to coincide with an incoming enemy attack, it triggers a perfect dodge. Think Billy with his M2. Each successfully timed directional attack applies a buff that stacks technically infinitely, and what does this buff do? It exponentially increases the damage that his final punch will do at the end of his Ora Ora. So the gameplay fantasy is, when you're in the Ora Ora state, you're weaving and dodging directional attacks, timing perfect dodges, building up insane multipliers, and then when you finally use up your morale resource, you end with a devastating finisher. He becomes both a buffer and a sub DPS. And also in general, I think supports doing more personal damage is just cool. That's every character. Look, so I know some of these ideas were pretty out there. Anton's RPM is basically a mini-game inside a game. Nakamura's charm rework is completely reimagining the character, and I'm fully aware that the Jufufu fix might not be enough to save her from her Dial-In problem. But game design isn't about finding one perfect solution. It's about exploring different possibilities and understanding why characters feel the way they do. Every buff idea I presented here came with asking two questions. What is the character's fantasy, and how can we lean on that? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Which buff ideas are your favorite? Which ones do you think